All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Tonight we're going to have a discussion on the redistricting that's occurring here in Nebraska. The Nebraska Progressive Legislative Study Group has a goal to inform the public on what's happening on the Nebraska unicameral and help folks kind of understand what's going on. And we know that redistricting is always something that our membership is concerned about. So we decided to do this, and we'd like to thank all of the senators for coming, and Rachel and Sam and our nonprofit folks. We started out with 4 organizers that founded the study group. It was me, I'm Angie Phillips, Cindy Maxwell Osdick, Christy Bradley, and Brooklyn Rosado. We recently have expanded thanks to having our membership is growing, and we've been able to add on some new organizers and folks to help out. So I'm excited to introduce one of our new organizers to everybody today. It's Kristen Dupree, and she will be moderating our event. So over to you, Kristen.
Great, thank you, Angie. So the purpose for this panel discussion is just to bring education and awareness to the redistricting process, kind of as Angie gave an overview for. And while the legislature will be drawing new maps for congressional districts, the State Board of Education districts, among others, we're going to narrow the scope and really focus on only the 49 legislative districts that will make up the unicameral. So this only happens, once every 10 years. And this year we have a delayed and compressed timeline due to the pandemic slowing down the census data gathering process. So the good thing about that is the legislature will meet for a special session and focus solely on redistricting. However, the bad thing is things are going to move very quickly. So that was part of the reason why we wanted to meet tonight and break down the process and also learn more about how we can get involved and help advocate for fair maps. So with that, we will meet our panelists. So first up, we have Sam Petto. Sam is Communications Director at the ACLU of Nebraska. He supports their advocacy efforts through public relations and marketing. And Sam joined the team 2 years ago, bringing a decade of experience in TV journalism and public relations. At the ACLU, he has announced key civil rights victories, launched statewide public awareness efforts, and last fall, he created a 6-figure nonpartisan voter mobilization campaign, contributing to historic turnout across the state. Welcome, Sam. Now, I understand that you also spent some time working at WOWT Omaha and helped produce Daybreak and 10 at 10. So, Sam, are you an early bird or a night owl?
Yeah, I'm an early bird, which makes the morning show actually brutal because you come in at 11:30 p.m. to produce it and you leave at 7:30 in the morning. So while Jim Seidlecki, Cerise Cole, Mallory Maddox for a time were the best people to work with, it is a brutal schedule. So I'm a firm early bird and grateful to be off that schedule.
I bet, yeah, early bird and a coffee addict, I bet. I know I would be. Great, well, we're happy to have you. Okay, next up, we have Rachel M. Gibson. So Rachel is a proud member of the League of Women Voters Nebraska and the League of Omaha, or of Greater Omaha. She currently serves on the League of Women Voters Nebraska Fair Maps Committee, focused on engaging and educating the public about the redistricting process. She also serves as the Director of Policy Education. Prior to her time at the League, Rachel worked in higher education as an academic and career counselor, program director, and data coordinator. When not having fascinating conversations with wonderful people across the state, she can be found in her very loud home in central Omaha, trying to keep up with her 2 energetic dogs and 2 young sons. So welcome, Rachel. It's great to see you. Now, Rachel has done a lot of work already, staying up to date on redistricting developments and education efforts. So Rachel, I'm curious, how many maps have you drawn so far?
So many maps. I actually realized that I saved one as maps the other night because I was on like draft 73 or something. So Yeah, excited to be here and chat a little bit about redistricting. And I've learned a lot about our state through the multiple maps I've drawn.
I'm sure. Yeah, the state of Nebraska is seared into your brain forever. Very good. Good. Okay, so we're moving on to Senator John McCollister. Senator McCollister represents District 20 in Omaha. He also grew up in Omaha and graduated from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln with a degree in business administration. After earning his degree, he then embarked on a 35-year career with McCollister and Company, a 3-generation family business that manufactured lubricants for large commercial, industrial, and private label customers in 14 Midwestern states. In 2014, Senator McCollister was elected to the Nebraska legislature. He is currently a member of the legislature's executive board, the Banking and Insurance, and Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs committees. During his tenure in the legislature, Senator McCollister has promoted criminal justice reform, government transparency, accessibility of public benefits, climate change, and renewable energy legislation. And in his free time, I know he's been spotted helping neighbors clean up debris after a major storm this past July. So, Senator McCollister, you looked pretty comfortable with that chainsaw. So, was that just...
I am indeed. But it's good to be with you. Redistricting has been a subject of mine for a good 5 years, and it's good to be on your show. You know, redistricting is a blood sport, and the political parties want to make the maps deep red or deep blue. And what, of course, gerrymandering does, it allows the lawmakers to select the voters, whereas it should be the voters select the lawmakers. So I'm glad to be with you, and I'm sure we'll have a good session.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Thank you, Senator McCollister. Appreciate you being here. Good. Okay, so we will move on to our next panelist. So a Nebraska girl since birth, Senator Carol Blood currently serves in the state legislature on behalf of District 3, comprising Southeastern Papillion and Bellevue. She is serving her second term and is on the Urban Affairs and Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs committees. She also serves as the vice chair of the Business and Labor Committee. Rumor has it she is considering a run for governor.
Huh.
Previously, she served 8 years on the Bellevue City Council and has been an active volunteer and advocate for decades. She and her husband, Joe, have 3 adult children and 10 grandchildren. Great, so welcome, Senator Blood. We're excited to have you tonight. So we have been hearing some exciting rumors. So would you happen to have any breaking news for us tonight?
I would like to say that I think they are very exciting rumors.
Very, very good. Well, we're gonna stay tuned for more on those rumors. Great. Okay, so rounding out our panel tonight is Senator Justin Wayne. So Senator Wayne is currently serving his second term representing District 13 of Omaha. He received his bachelor's degree from Creighton University and went on to earn his JD from Creighton University School of Law. Prior to being elected to the state legislature, he served on the Omaha Public School Board, including a 2-year term as president. Senator Wayne is also an attorney, as well as the CEO of Trailblazers Constructors, LLC. When he's not serving his district and community, he enjoys spending time with his wife and 2 children. So welcome, Senator Wayne. We're excited to have you.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I think this will be an interesting discussion, and I look forward to it.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so we are ready to just dive right in to our first question. So I'm going to look to Rachel to start us off, but of course, throughout the panel, anyone's invited to chime in as we go through our topics. Okay, so Rachel, we're gonna start at sort of level 0 here. We're gonna start at the beginning. So what is redistricting and why is it so important?
Yes, thank you so much for starting from that place, because redistricting is not something that we talk a lot about, but is really a primary piece of making our democracy work. So essentially what redistricting is it's redrawing our lines every 10 years to mirror where our population is, to make our voting districts both equal and meaningful. And that's kind of the two ways that we think about it. Equal meaning that they are equal in number. So no group of voters has more or less power to their vote. And we're also not asking our representatives, one to represent 5 and another to represent 50. So that's the first piece, is that numbers, the equal piece. And then the second piece, which is just as important, is making our districts meaningful. So the process of grouping those voters in districts with people who have similar needs, similar legislative things that they're going to need, so that they can elect someone from their own community to represent that at those different levels of government. So that's exactly what redistricting is redrawing those lines every 10 years for those different districts. Now, why is it important? It's the building blocks. It's the building blocks of how we pick who we pick to represent our communities. And it also is kind of high stakes. I mean, if you think about it, these stick around for 10 years. So when you do the math on that in the state of Nebraska, that's 2 presidential elections. But among the whole state, that's 15 House seats, and that's 122 unicameral seats terms. So the stakes are high, and we want to get it right the first time so that these districts are again equal and meaningful. So that's why redistricting is so important, and I'm so thankful that we're having this conversation. We've got some great senators and panelists to add to it.
Wonderful. Yes, thank you. I like how you broke down the seats over the number of 10 years, because that really shows a good picture of how important and kind of lasting these decisions are. Great. So we're going to build on that foundation and talk about sort of the reason districts need to be redrawn. And that is because, of course, the population changes over time. And, how is the change in population measured? Well, with census data. So the 2020 census data was released on August 13th. And I will look to Sam to kind of walk us through some of the takeaways from the census data release.
Yeah, I'm happy to do my best. And I think this will probably be part of a larger conversation too, with a lot of the questions I know we're expecting to cover. For folks who don't know the ACLU, just very quickly, we're a civil rights and civil liberties organization. And so why are we involved in redistricting? It's really about protecting your right to vote, which is that right that all your other rights and liberties rest on. And so with redistricting, that means a nonpartisan, fair process that protects that idea of one person, one vote. So every 10 years, we do that census, we get a count of everybody, and then we have to look at how the state's been changing and how we're redrawing those lines to make sure that we're really honoring that idea of one person, one vote. So in looking at the trends, and I know we're going to stay mainly focused on LDs here, but I think it's helpful to think in 3 buckets. And that's number 1 is what's happening in the state as a whole. Number 2, real quickly, congressional districts, what do we need to do? And then 3, really, what's a picture for America's treasure, our nationally unique unicameral government. So the state as a whole, we are just ticking so close, creeping close to 2 million people. We're up about 7% from the last time we did the census. And that growth is not evenly distributed. What it looks like is some of our highest growth along the eastern edge of the state and along some of that I-80 corridor, counties like Buffalo and Hall that are ticking up and among the fastest growing. Moving to bucket 2 in terms of congressional districts, we're going to, well, state senators, some of the folks on this call are going to have the job of redistributing tens of thousands of voters across them. So we want as close to one person, one vote as possible. We have 3 people in Congress. And so really it should be about 33% of Nebraskans in each area having a say on who their federal representative is going to be. And right now, CD3 is about 50,000 behind where it needs to be. CD2 is about 50,000 ahead of where it needs to be. It needs to shrink up a little. And right in that Goldilocks zone is CD1. So that needs to get sorted out to make sure that we're as close to absolutely equal as possible there. And then in terms of legislative districts, and again, I think this is going to be a lot of the meat to this conversation. We talked about where those fastest growing communities, that there are some of the fastest growing communities along the eastern edge of the state. And so state senators are going to make sure, or are going to have to make sure, that there's more representation to those communities and those areas that have been growing quickly. And so right now, those urban areas of Douglas, Sarpy, and Lancaster County make up about 56% of the state population, and that equates to about 27 seats in the unicameral. Right now, the number I saw in the World Herald is 25.8, and that's because some seats touch on to different counties and different areas. There's some flexibility, some guidelines in terms of how they should be doing it. We talked a little about, and I'm sure we'll talk more about, ideas like making contiguous maps, something you can draw without picking your hand up off the paper, and also communities of interest, not just splitting historic neighborhoods down the middle or areas where people have some sort of feature or bond in common. And so looking at it, if you're just taking a look at the map as a whole and where we've seen some of the most really significant growth, we'll be looking at areas like the areas kind of just west of or part of West Omaha, your Elkhorn, Gretna, Bennington, that's LD 39, 49, and 10, as areas where we'd expect to see some movement, some changes to make sure that too many folks aren't packed into one district, kind of lessening the votes of the people who are in there because they just have that one state senator. And there's also some areas kind of on the outside, north and south Lincoln, where we saw really significant growth. And the flip of that is you're looking at, okay, where is our state not growing? There are some areas specifically out in the Panhandle and parts of greater Nebraska where we already have very geographically large legislative districts that are probably going to have to grow even larger as we look at figuring that out. So that's kind of the broad picture of the state creeping real close to 2 million folks. Congressional districts, we've got some sorting out to do where we need to move about 50,000 folks around to even things out, make sure we're sitting at that 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. And then finally, in terms of LDs, we have some really quickly growing areas in the last decade, and we need to make sure that the folks who are living there have the same equal vote and voice as folks do in different parts of the state.
Great, thank you, Sam. Yeah, that was a great discussion on movements of population in our state. So it sounds like the urban counties deserve, so maybe at least one additional district, one additional representative, but that means the rural, everywhere else would lose one. So I think that will be a point of contention.
Right. The math is 1.2 state senators, so I'll leave it to the state senators on this call and how they figure that out with the current makeup.
Exactly. Very good.
Can I hop in here if that's okay, Kristen?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah. So I think Sam did such a great job of laying out what that looks like and how the shift in population is the context of what we're talking about here. And one thing that, we've really been talking about with the League of Women Voters is that idea of our map should be representing what exists. So that's sometimes the conversation about, just the language of like losing a vote or deserve or gaining or those types of things. It can feel like that's part of a game, but really when you step back, it's about representing the voters and a reflection of that. So that's something that, sometimes in the media and whatnot, you hear this language that pits us against each other in a way, but it really is just representative of where our population is because it's moved. So that's something that I think Sam highlighted really well, is that idea of it is that census-based, population-based, meant to be representative.
Driven by the data. Yes, that's exactly right. Yes, thank you both. Good. Okay. Well, I think that's a fantastic foundation that Rachel and Sam have set for us. So let's start kind of digging into the process. So a special redistricting committee was established during the normal session earlier in the year, and so I think we should maybe talk about who's on that committee and what they have accomplished so far. And any one of the senators on the call who would be happy to start.
I'll go ahead and start on that. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. So there are 9 people on this committee. There are 4 Democrats and 5 Republicans. And our committee actually did meet already on August 30th to discuss the rules. We're drawing up the maps and how we want our public hearings to look and working with Nebraskans as we move forward as a committee. We were unable to wrap that up on the 30th, but we will be wrapping that up at tomorrow's meeting, where we'll also be breaking out into subcommittees. And the subcommittees are going to be proposing maps for the U.S. House of Representatives, the legislature, the Nebraska Supreme Court, the Board of Regents for the University of Nebraska, the Public Service Commission, and the State Board of Education. And as you have already discussed multiple times over, we're going to draw the maps in a way that really attempts to follow the county lines whenever it's practical and really follow traditional districting principles, which includes defining the districts that are compact and contiguous, which again, you've already heard, preserving the communities of interest, and of course, allowing for the preservation of the cores of the prior districts. So these maps also, we know, need to make sure that we're not going to dilute our minority populations. One of the things that I want to bring to light tonight is one of the things we're going to be discussing tomorrow, and I'm sure Senator Wayne, who's also on the committee, can speak more on this, is whether or not we are going to have these discussions in an open arena, in an open environment. In the past, that was always done in executive session, and I've heard reasonings for both. But for me, because we are doing it in such a compact and condensed way this time, I think that it's paramount that people see how we do it and how we come to these decisions. And frankly, I don't know why people would be hesitant to say things in a public forum that they're more prone to say in a closed forum. We're doing it for Nebraskans. Nebraskans should be able to see the process. So when we do have the public hearings on the maps that we bring to the legislature, you know how we got to that point and what we were thinking when we got to that point. I'm going to go ahead and let Senator Wayne and Senator McCollister speak as well, but Senator Wayne is one of the other senators on that committee.
You're on mute.
Senator Wayne, can you unmute
No,
yourself?
sorry about that. So there will be a discussion tomorrow about executive. Historically, it's always been done in executive. When we say executive, it's still open to the media, and the media still reports on it. Like I said in exec last time, that it doesn't matter which way I go. I'm going to say how I feel about it either way. I do think that when you start talking about it, you have to take what does that mean as far as transparency. So can I call Senator Blood and talk about it since she's on the committee? Can I call Senator Blood and Senator Lathrop since they're on the committee and they both kind of represent the Douglas County, Sarpy County area? So when we talk about transparency, there's levels. And so I just hope that whatever we decide, we're clear and consistent. We're also consistent. It doesn't bother me either way. I think at the end of the day, there's going to be plenty of feedback, as I've already heard that you've drawn multiple maps. So I think we'll get plenty of feedback on maps. And I think the biggest thing is the preservation of the core. We know, statistically speaking, the reality is between Lincoln and Omaha, there could be up to 3 seats that could move to there. But how do you do that while preserving the core? And I'm just talking number-wise. Number-wise, there was a migration to the east on the census data of about 130,000. Each district is about 48,000. So if you plug in the math, it's 2.5 to 3 districts that should move to the east. That's going to be the fighting or sticking point, is this urban and rural divide. And what people need to know that doesn't happen just because it's now redistricting. That's been going on in the legislature since Omaha and Lincoln were urban and they were still rural. So there'll be a lot of discussion. The thing about it, at the end of the day, I just tell people to stay engaged and contact your senator or contact any senator, and we'll do the best we can to communicate with you however the committee decides.
I'll just add the population deviation between some of the urban and rural districts is considerable. The average size district should be around 40,033, something around there. And I've heard that we could at least get 2 more urban districts. And I got that impression from David Groves from the UNL in a presentation they made. So yeah, I'm hopeful that we can do this and maintain one person, one vote. It's interesting that the national elections for Congress, they allow no deviation, none at all. But in the legislative contest, I think it's plus or minus 5%. And I don't think you can deviate from that without ending up in court. And maybe Justin's got a sense on that.
So the committee, we went 5 and 5. That's what it's always been, the committee. There was talk about moving to 3% and even 1%. Congress deviation is 1%. The issue right now is I think most districts are about 1 to 2%. I think there's one district that is 3%. Nobody's ever gotten to the 5%. The problem with the 1% deviation with 40,000 people is you'll literally start splitting neighborhoods. And I've talked to multiple, somebody in my office also was there 10 years ago who worked on the maps for Senator Heath Mello at the time, and not having that flexibility to at least go up to 2 or 3% was a huge deal. Because you literally would start splitting like Benson and Omaha. You would literally split that. It just, that deviation allows you to play with it, but we always strive to have 0%, but there is some flexibility there, especially when you start talking about rural areas where you could actually split counties. And so that deviation allows that flexibility. Well, that's the reason behind it. Whether we agree with it or not, I think that'll be up to the floor debate as the whole body moves forward. I'm just telling you the reason the committee and discussions in the committee.
If you can keep it to 2 or 3%, I think that's great.
That's the goal.
Good, very good. Yes, thank you for bringing up transparency, and just for a little background for some of the audience, our viewers that are watching. You know, this study group was kind of founded with the vision of the unicameral in mind. Which was, you know, built on the idea that, you know, the unicameral is made up of one house of elected officials, and the other house is made up of, you know, citizens of Nebraska. Sort of, you know, citizens make up the second house, and so that's to encourage, you know, public input, advocacy, and you know, we want to try to educate and try to advocate for fair maps, you know, as much as we, you know, we can as private citizens. So, you know, on that note, you know, I guess we haven't got to it yet, but the special session starts on September 13th. So less than 2 weeks away. Are there public hearings scheduled yet? Or do you have a timeline of kind of milestone dates that can be shared at this point?
There are public hearings on the 14th, 15th, and 16th, on the 14th in Grand Island, and the 15th in Lincoln, and on the 16th in Omaha. We do have a website that I'm sure you'll share later that is available to the public that puts this information as far as when the hearings are, when our meetings are. Any data that's sent to the senators is also put up on that website. So that is available for the public. It'll give the locations and the times of the hearings. I believe the one in Grand Island is at 1:30. And I believe the other two are at 9. Does that sound right, Senator Wayne and Senator McCollister? Going by memory here.
I can't recall.
All right, well, that's my recollection. And then, of course, our bill needs to be drafted and sent to bill drafters by September 10th. That's an important date because it's got to be ready to take to the floor on the 13th. And then it is anticipated that the 17th is going to be general file debate.
There's one caveat to that. This is So this is what's weird about this session. So normally our rules are the redistricting committee would start if this was a normal session and we had this in April. Our redistricting would start in like April. They would kick out a bill, and they're the only ones allowed to introduce a bill after the first 10 days. And that bill would be the basis of the debate. Now, senators can always amend any bill at any juncture on any round. But what's different is, since we're calling a special session, nobody besides probably myself and Senator Chambers recognize that a special session allows anybody to introduce a bill the first 3 days. So any senator can introduce a bill on the first 3 days. And I say there's a caveat to that, because if a senator introduces their own map, we have a culture that every bill introduced has a hearing. So we will have to have a hearing either that Friday or Monday on those bills that were introduced by senators outside of the committee. Well, even a committee member can introduce their own bill. So that's a little caveat to this whole process, is we may have our public maps already done and have the hearings on them, and we may have to have a hearing on 8 or 15 or 30 new maps that were introduced by individual senators, because our rules allow for 3 days of any bill to be introduced dealing with the subject of the call of the special session. So there's a little twist in that.
Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Wayne. I apologize. And that's going to be even more confusing if all of that happens, plus the fact that a lot of the committees need to meet on appointments, it's my understanding. And so we may be expected to be at 2 or 3 places at one time. And for those of us on the redistricting committee, obviously that's our first priority, but we may have our committees that are meeting back in Lincoln on appointments, and we won't be able to be in those meetings. I know that Senator Wayne is the chair of one of the committees that has an appointment, and I'm not sure what he's thinking in his head he's going to do, but I think they've really created kind of a perfect storm of indecision for us as to where we need to be and how we're going to pull it off.
Can I give just from the outside, give a thought on the transparency piece and the public input? Because especially the way that you all have just described what that looks like in the weeds in the special session, it just reaffirms this from, our advocacy side of the League of Women Voters, that we want people reaching out now to their senators, if they have things that they're wanting to make sure happen, so that hopefully that's heard before the drafts are out, as opposed to having to really leverage that alternate maps once they get to the floor. I mean, that sounds, am I hearing that correctly from the senators, is that the best way we can do this is to be involved now? And also that kind of reaffirms that idea for transparency. It would be much more helpful for the committee if we're able to be part of the conversation earlier rather than later. Is that a fair assessment of what we're talking about here from a public standpoint?
I think that's a very fair assessment. You need to be involved now. Don't put it off. That means emails, that means phone calls, that means social media to the senators that are involved in social media. That means being present. And Rachel, you've done a great job of that. I'm not sure this is a really good time to mention it or not, but I keep listening to some of the things that you guys are saying, especially at the very beginning when we talk about gerrymandering. I want to remind everybody too, I'm not as worried about gerrymandering this time, and let me tell you why. They did a really effective job of gerrymandering Sarpy County last time. I mean, if you look at it, it's clearly gerrymandered. And we've already proven that you can gerrymander to one party's benefit, but it's really about how effective your candidates are. And we've overcome that gerrymandering several times in our county. So I just want to remind people of that I think that some of that has lost its effectiveness. It doesn't prevent it necessarily from happening, but I do think that everybody on the committee has good intentions, that we want to be fair and we want to be honest and we want to be transparent. I can't speak for everybody, but my impression is we all want to be the adults in the room and do it right.
I have a question for the 2 committee members. The hearings start on the 14th. Will the body as a whole vote on the maps before you take the maps on the road?
No.
But the committee will vote on the maps, correct?
We hope. We hope we get a vote before then, because it has to go to the floor.
But
That's
they
what
don't go to the floor until after the committee, the hearings, correct?
Correct.
It goes to drafting on the 10th, Senator McCollister, and to the floor on the 13th.
Now, I just want to back up, and there's a couple of things I want to remind people of who are watching this, that this isn't some rush because the powers that be, or whoever it may be, is deciding to play a trick.
Right.
The problem is, in Nebraska, we have a lot of things in our Constitution. A lot of other states have things in statutes, but we have a lot of stuff in our Constitution, and that is because we have a unicameral and we believe in the second house, and we take many things to the vote of the people to check the check and balances of our unicameral. So one of the things we have in our Constitution is you have to live in your district in a year prior. So we have to get these maps done for even people to run for office as a legislature or a state senator by November. So that's one of them. The second problem is the counties and every other small political subdivision. When I say small, I mean smaller than the legislature. So it's every city, every county, everywhere. We have in our Constitution that one legislative district has to be in per precinct. So we have to get these done for them to draw their districts in order to make their primaries in the May. So it's just this weird coronavirus, not having data, everything coming together that, I mean, we sat, leadership sat, and I say we, I guess I wasn't part of all the conversations, but many of the leadership and committee chairs sat during session trying to figure out a way around this to even maybe cancel the primary or push it back. But constitutionally, there was just certain obligations we could not change even during the pandemic, because a constitution change requires a vote of the people. And so that's the shortened timeline. I just hope people don't feel like we're just trying to rush through it because we want to, even though there's some argument maybe we are rushing through it. But there is this time frame that we have a drop dead date of probably mid-October, that if we don't figure something out, it puts all the political subdivisions in a huge bind.
And, you know, recognizing the reality of that situation, I can just speak for the ACLU, and it's probably the same for Rachel at the League of Women Voters, is we hope to see really aggressive communication and really frequent communication about this process, because it is the reality of the situation that it's going to be a truncated timeline. However, we're all here. There's all eyes on this process because it is so important, because those decisions that happen are going to impact people's communities and lives for the next 10 years. So just if it helps, know there's a lot of folks and a lot of groups out there who are really hoping for really frequent updates. You know, we see things like hospital emergency press conferences, et cetera, really transparent, easy to understand communication, so folks aren't turned off by a bureaucratic process or conversations about 2% or 3% deviation. We just all really appreciate that, to try to marry that difficult situation we're in with a really accessible format for the public. Just like how in the wake of the George Floyd killing, we saw kind of on the road hearings in the community where folks could come out and share those thoughts and those experiences. Those are sort of things we'd really like to see. And I know it's a group process, so not putting anyone on the spot, but adding that to the mix.
But Sam, I think some individual senators have been reaching out. I know for a fact to the ACLU and the League and Common Cause Nebraska. Rachel, wouldn't you say that that's the case, that as soon as some of the senators on that committee get the information, they immediately forward it on to you?
Yeah, I would say that and we're so thankful for the communication that we can get, and it depends on the senator of how much information and how quickly it gets back to us. But yes, we are getting communication as we have it. It just is moving at breakneck pace. And I just think Sam made an excellent point. To me, the argument for transparency is even stronger there, because if public's involved and we're able to help the process move smoothly from the beginning, it's going to move smoother once it gets to the floor, would be my thought from the outside looking in.
So what I would tell anybody, if they have maps somewhat drawn, you can submit them to my office and I'll run them through the LRO. We have core principles that we're trying to follow. So they'll put it up against there. I know my staff was there all day yesterday and today working on maps. And so part of this time crunch is we got the data late mid-August, but it took 2 weeks for even the data to be put in the software to make it usable because the data was so big and so much value. But then after that, like yesterday, a couple of the committee members, like myself and Senator Geis, were on the LR 29 committee, which deals with St. Francis and what's going on in Omaha and Douglas. So we had a hearing at 1:30 yesterday. So the reality is there's other kind of committees that were also, I mean, St. Francis, I argue, is just as important as redistricting. So we're trying to split those times at the same time of trying to keep this crunch. So if we're not communicating, I guess what I'm telling you is don't be scared to shoot us an email so we can respond back to you. It isn't that we're not thinking about it. It's I might be looking at a binder on St. Francis that day and not thinking about it.
Thanks, Senator Wayne. I always worry about pestering, but also we're a group of ladies who are going to get it done, and gentlemen that would like some information. So much appreciated for that clarification.
Right. Yes. So that was great. And we did cover a lot of information and a lot of details right there. So I just want to reiterate a couple of them. So it sounds like in order, if the public or nonprofits want to submit a draft map, that needs to be done during the first 3 days of the session. So by September 15th, is that correct?
Before.
No. If a senator can introduce a bill the first 3 days. So if you have a map and you want a senator to introduce it, that needs to get to the LRO, which is our Legislative Research Office, by September 9th or 10th, just to make sure that they can run through and make sure that map doesn't violate our core principles. And they'll tell the committee, hey, here's some of the issues. I would tell you don't wait that long because the committee's already probably going to make a decision by then on which one's going to go out. So if you want your map to be a part of that discussion, I would tell you to have it to us by Tuesday.
And can I ask a clarifying question with that too? Because in drafting these maps and in talking with some of the other nonprofit organizations, Common Cause is the first one that comes to mind. It's one of those we aren't map drafters, so we're putting together what makes sense to us. So our thought is we're sharing this and saying this is what makes sense to us, not necessarily this is the exact map you should use. Please see every single deviation we've got. Is that from the committee standpoint, is that considered? Is that useful information for us to share, knowing that this might not be the exact map that gets used? Is that still helpful?
I think at this point, I'm going to stop talking so much. Any information you provide us would be a good thing. And the reason why I say get it to us ahead of time is because it's a bill. So I may draw the map out on paper, but I got to turn that map into language and legalese. And that's why I say we need time to move that through. And we got to make sure we don't violate certain principles. For example, I just got elected and so did Senator Blood. So we have a constitutional right to be in office for 4 years. So you can't move us out of our district. And not everybody thinks about that when they're drawing maps. So it's really the only senators who could quote unquote be moved are those who have already served their 4-year terms. So that's just one example. There's multiple other examples about different principles you got to live by when you draw these maps. And so when people come to us with a map, and I had one constituent already email me and they put me in another district. And I was just like, well, I know you want me in your district, but we can't do that.
We're just senators when
Well, and Senator Wayne, to what you just said, I mean, the assessment of fairness, that's what we laid out in that legislative resolution, is to make sure that things like that don't happen. I know that people are really worried about us being fair, but again, I go back to the legislative resolution that the entire body voted on, and it set the guidelines. And if we follow those guidelines, what the final result is going to be fair as we can be with the data that we have, and utilizing the Maptitude software, which is designed to help us be fair.
I'll ask a question. To what extent is legislative research guided by those principles that Carol just outlined, or the principles that the committee members have asked for. Have committee members been giving input into legislative research?
Yeah, we're a team, Senator McCollister. We are working with LRO. We work in tandem. Ultimately, it's our decision what we want to do and how we want to do it, but they're the keepers of the data.
Yep.
Would you say that
That's fair. And the other thing is that every senator or designee can go in and draw their own maps.
right?
So it's truly open. And in fact, community members, if they go along with a senator, can draw maps. We're trying to limit that because of COVID, but if there is something that you got a map and you want to put it in there, I know my office will help out with it. But the problem is because of COVID, and the number of stations we have with the software, you only get like a 1.5 or 2 hour time slot. So, and let me tell you, drawing a legislative district across the state is very hard to do in 2 hours.
And we only have 2 workstations.
Yeah.
Just to clarify.
Good. So on that note, for the specifically to drawing maps, I know there are a few free, web-based tools out there that are available to the public. I know one is called Dave's Redistricting app, and that's really cool. I spent a little bit of time on that. But would, for the senators on the call, would maps that are drawn sort of at home using the software that's available, would those be acceptable to submit? Or does it have to be from the legislative workstation?
I've used several of those online resources as well. They all basically utilize the same type of criteria. I think it's fine to utilize whatever you find, be it Dave's or the 10 others that are available. It really is more about taking the data that you have. Those numbers don't change, right, Kristen? Right? The numbers don't change. They're the same in every language.
Numbers don't lie. Yep.
That's right. So I think it's still going to be just as acceptable as the maptitude that we're utilizing.
Good. Okay. Good. So now, as I guess I have a lot of questions. I guess when should we expect the first iteration of the map that the committee has sort of approved or voted on? When should we expect to see that? Is that known? It depends on how many maps get submitted.
The committee goal is to have a vote by next Friday, the 10th. Is that next Friday? Yeah, not this Friday, but the following. That is the goal in order to put the maps out publicly for the hearings and to introduce the bill on the 13th. And the reason why that's important is because the bill is introduced on the 13th per our rules. It has to lay over to be referenced to general file. So it won't even be debatable until the 14th or 15th. So every day that's delayed moves the debate on the bill, but we can't have a public hearing on the 14th, 15th, and 16th if we don't have a bill out of committee by a minimum the 13th. So the 10th is the goal. Drop dead date is going to be the 13th, or everything just blew up and we're back to ground zero.
Well, the 13th, Senator Wayne, isn't that just basically a check-in day?
Yes.
So don't expect anything spectacular to happen on the 13th. I mean, you never know, but it shouldn't.
It strikes me that the ask for some folks to put together their own maps may be kind of a higher barrier than some folks are comfortable with. Would it also be helpful if they said, hey, the old market is my area, and I really think the old market in Omaha should be in one legislative district. Don't break it up. That's what makes sense to me. Is that kind of feedback in a short email just as helpful, or could it be just as helpful to you all in approaching this kind of on the communities of interest and existing districts, or is that not enough for approaching this process?
I would find that more helpful because it's more concise and less time consuming on our part to try and interpret what your wants and needs are, as opposed to a map that has lots of information on it. So if there is something that's key to you, that's very important to you, for me, and again, I can't speak for the other senators, but I find it very beneficial when people are very concise and to the point.
I agree.
Kristen, I might mention that the maps will be subject to regular debate. So we have the hearings, we come back into session. So, the mapping bill could be filibustered, just like any other bill that comes up before the legislature. And you might recall that we worked 30 days on the rules, I think, in 2017. So, I hope it goes well, but we do have relief in the fact that we can filibuster this bill.
So I have a question sort of related to that, Senator McCollister. Because in our timeline, we present a timeline of this is how redistricting works. And the last point is the governor vetoes or approves. What happens if the governor vetoes? Because I'm thinking of the timeline that Senator Wayne set out there. I mean, what then? Or is that one of those we're not thinking about that because there's not capacity to have that worry at this point?
Well, it could very well happen, and we do have that time crunch, and so it's important for us to reach resolution. So it's important for the committee to draw good and fair maps the first time around, and I hope they take that into account.
I mean, for example, if they fundamentally change, my district or Senator McKinney's district or anywhere East Omaha, you will see a filibuster out of me. And I feel the same way that if we fundamentally change Senator Brewer's district or Senator Erdman's district, you will see a filibuster out of them. So it's going to be a very delicate balance of how do we get this done, and it really comes back to what's fair, and having that broad conversation about what's fair.
And we've already had discussions about how important it is to make sure that we don't dilute minority populations. I know one of the things that did come up for discussion on Monday was whether the census data might be underrepresented in rural areas. But then you hear the other school of thought is that, well, we believe that it's also underrepresented in certain urban areas. And so it's going to be our jobs to cut through all of that stuff and trust that the data is as accurate as it can be. And we can only work with the data that we have, not the data that we wish that we had.
One other thing I should mention, we're running short of time, that if the maps aren't quite representative, folks can take the maps to court, the Nebraska Supreme Court. They have that as another option if the maps aren't fair in their estimation. And thirdly, we could do a petition drive to form an independent commission. Some states have done that. And if all else fails, that could very well happen.
Which is another reason for good transparency, much like Idaho has the independent commission, and the entire process is very transparent. I think that we have a lot of smart people on this committee. And again, I think the goal is to be fair. And of course, if people are unhappy with the maps and they feel we didn't follow the legislative resolution guidelines, they do have the right to take it to court. But I don't see the committee going in that direction. And I have to say that it concerns me when people plant seeds that say that we might not be honest or above board, because I feel that everybody's intent on that committee is to be honest and above board and use the data that's given to us correctly and to work together to make the best map that we can.
And I would echo that by saying the time crunch in a way has lessened the politics that I think you would have saw if this would have happened in April. Because we knew that we could have stretched it out. We knew we could have went all the way till November. And so I think everybody's like, if we mess this up and it becomes this big fight, now everybody, not just the legislature, but every political subdivision is having problems. And that means every legislative person like myself and these other two on here, we're going to get calls from everybody because every election is messed up. And so I think that has changed the dynamics that you would normally see in a redistricting across the country, is that everybody's so dependent right now on getting this done, at least before November. I mean, you have literally colleagues who, if this goes into December, may not be able to run because they don't live in the district.
Well, and our goal is to get a supermajority vote, which means 33 out of 49 senators. So if we're playing games and we're making this political, which, by the way, it only becomes political if we allow it to be, right? It's about the people otherwise. So we need to like really be focused on that and watch our language when we talk about it, because so many times I hear, it's going to be unfair. It's going to be gerrymandered. It's going to be us versus them. That's not happening right now. So let's quit putting that stuff out into the universe and have trust in the process, because I'm here to tell you that I trust the process. I trust the data. I trust that people are there for the right reason. And my only concern is how transparent we're going to be. If we can be more transparent, I think that puts the ribbon on the top. And fingers crossed we can get that super majority, because we did the right thing.
Great. Yep, totally agree, Senator Blood. Yeah, thank you for that. Good. So we're planning to go to 8:15. So if everyone can stay on, we have a little bit more Q&A planned. And there was one question, kind of a clarifying question, and that was related to sort of some of the implied criteria that are required for the districts. And I think Senator Wayne, you mentioned that the current sitting senator, because they were elected and have the constitutional reason to represent their district, the new district must include them in the district. Is that correct?
It doesn't have to be their same exact district, but the simpler way of changing it, saying, is that their number really can't change. So let's take Senator Jen Day or Senator Kavanaugh, John Kavanaugh just got elected. They have to stay in their term for 4 years. So you can't move them to where they have to run in 2 years. They have to finish out their 4-year term. I guess it's the easiest way to explain it. So you can't move them into a Senator Hunt's district, because she has to run, or Senator Kavanaugh, Michaela Kavanaugh, and say, now you have to run in 2. They have a constitutional right to stay 4 years. So you have to navigate that.
Okay. But their lines can move.
Their lines can move. Absolutely.
Okay. And great. Yeah, that was Deb's question. Yeah. Thanks, Deb. Good. Okay. So I have kind of a general question, and maybe we'll look more at the Q&A. But so for, the senators that are on the redistricting committee, you of course are, representing your district that you've been elected to serve, but you're also, serving the entire state of Nebraska, especially for these very important, long-lasting decisions. And, some of the articles that have been published, this week, we're quoting, one senator in particular that made me a little nervous about, the intentions. But how do you kind of balance, representing your district's interests, but also representing the state as a whole, their interests, and making sure that all Nebraskans are represented fairly?
Well, I think you represent your district well when you represent Nebraska, Kristen. We talk a lot about our districts, it's important that we're a good voice for our district, because they're the ones that elect us. But they elect us to serve all Nebraskans. And so I serve my district the best when I serve all Nebraskans the best I can do. I'm not worried about not being able to balance the rest of Nebraska, because I'm meeting the needs of my district. Then my district wants us to draw fair maps, period. They have the expectation that, again, that we will be honest, that we will work together, that it'll be about the policy and not the politics. That's, I keep saying that over and over again, Kristen. People are sick and tired of this narrative of us versus them. And unfortunately, we have people in our body that are participating in that narrative. And redistricting is a great platform to utilize that narrative yet again. We have the ability to do this in a way that is nonpartisan, as the unicameral and its uniqueness has been able to do as well, right? So for me, I serve my district the best when I serve all of Nebraska. And I serve all of Nebraska by being fair, by being honest, by utilizing the data that we're given, and by utilizing the criteria that was set forward in the legislative resolution that all of the body voted on and passed. I can only speak for me, Senator Wayne. I'll let you speak for yourself.
So how I represent in my district is very simple to me, that poor Nebraska, whether it's in my district or in a small town, Western, the fundamental problem is economic development and jobs. That's been the baseline. And I think that's why I overrode the governor, a Republican governor. I'm a Democrat, a couple of years ago for Omaha and regional transit, was because we bridged those gaps. And when you start having conversations and saying the symptoms may be different, the drug use may be different from a certain type of drug out in Western Nebraska to Omaha, but the core issue is people having good paying jobs. When the people have good paying jobs, a lot of our social issues go away. That's how I approach everything. My community wants to make sure that their voice is heard in a reasonable way. Senator Brewer's community wants to make sure that their voices are heard in a reasonable way. I don't want 75,000 people in my district. Brewer doesn't want to have a district as big as Texas. So we have to manage that, because that makes it still unreasonable for Brewer to go across the state from Wyoming to Iowa, which is where some people have said the map should go. And I disagree with that. So you approach it that way, saying the individuals are the same, whether in your district or in Senator Brewer's district or even Senator Erdman's district. And you approach it that way, saying they want the same kind of representation. They may believe different things, but they want the same kind of representation. And when you get to that kind of basic level, a lot of the noise and the politics goes away. And so the couple senators who may have been quoted and may cause some concern to you, that's jockeying for the big negotiation, right? That's jockeying about whether there's 3 districts leaving rural or is it just 1. And it may be none. And it could be a stretch. I'm just throwing out ideas because we haven't seen all the maps, and maps can be drawn different ways. But it's the same time as some senators saying, well, we're going to get 3 districts. And that senator is like, we're not going to take anything from rural. We're going to stay here. That's just everybody positioning themselves for the great negotiation of what's best. And I don't even pay attention to that, because that's what it is. It's for the news media, and it's for people back home to feel like, hey, they're in the fight for us. But at the end of the day, they're going to sit at the table and we're going to get it done. And I've always believed that.
It's really pretty interesting, because the Redistricting Committee, 9 people, 3 from every congressional caucus, is eminently fair, I think. And you look at the composition of the 4 and 5, whereas currently there's about 33% Democrats in the body, but the Redistricting Committee gives the Democrats 44%. So on the face, it's a fair process. And we certainly hope it stays that way.
I will say this bluntly. There was more, I thought, political and jockeying going on to who's getting on the redistricting committee than I believe that will happen in the redistricting committee as far as the plans. And it's because of what Senator McCollister just said. You got to have 3 from each district. You can only have 5 of one party and 4 from another party. And when you start factoring that in as far as minorities and women, and now it's a big discussion about who's on the committee. And you have to make sure the committee, when it comes out, meets the criteria, or at least looks across the face that it represents Nebraska, or this process was dead from the beginning. So I felt like there were more conversations around that process than what will happen when it comes to the actual maps. That's just personally how I feel.
Hope so.
Yeah, I agree with you, Senator. But I thought it was a good dialogue to have. And I think we ended up with a committee that actually is exactly what you said. It looks like Nebraska to the best of our ability. Kristen, I keep getting asked about the criteria in the thread. And I just want to refer everybody to LR 134 because that lists the criteria that we use to do the mapping.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for that call out. Yeah. So that was the resolution that the committee put together to make kind of the rules for drafting the map. I think the big one is that the deviation between each district can be up 5% or down 5%. That's the guideline, not the rule. Great. So someone else asked briefly, and this is for people that want to draw their maps. With the kind of the implied guideline that we talked about was where senators live. Maybe is any of that information available, or how do people navigate that when there's a senator that's just got reelected or elected and they have to stay in their district? Is there any guidance on how to think about that?
So, I mean, I shouldn't have said it because now people are focused on that. Don't get focused on it. What I would tell you to focus on, and that's why I said if you send the maps to us, we'll run all those traps for you, because what the community should focus on is community of interest, preserving the core values. The last thing you should worry about is who the elected official is.
Gotcha. Okay, great. So kind of the way to advocate for fair maps in this process, contact your senator sort of ASAP and talk about listening to the data, what's important to you in your community, where you live, and you think that your neighborhood should stay compact. What else would be really, really good and meaningful for the public to share with their senators? Is there anything else you want to reiterate or that was left out?
Avoid crossing county lines.
I don't think we've really talked about the importance of funding. We need to make sure that what we do is right, because we also need to know that when it comes to federal.
Senator Blood is freezing.
So something about funding and the way funds are distributed.
Funding
by congressional districts, that is important.
Yeah, it's really, really important when it comes to federal funding. And so that would be something else I'd want to hear. What funds is your community most, what are most important to your community? So I think that's one thing I didn't hear touched down on at all tonight is the funding aspect of it.
The funding aspect. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. That's helpful. Great. So this has been lots of information. Yes. Very helpful. I know we want to stay up to date and stay in touch, and hopefully everything will be as transparent as possible. Are there, let's see, I think the last question, maybe what we should end on is, are there any events coming up that maybe Rachel you'd want to share to let people know about more how to get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking about that. I want to, especially after having this conversation, I want to reiterate that idea of reaching out to your senator directly, your senator, and identifying, even if it's a line or two, what's important to you. So Senator McCollister, get ready for my email because I'm in your district.
Okay, fair enough.
So I think that's one piece of it for sure. The public hearings, if people are able to go to those, I think that's going to be really important. And even if people don't feel like they have something prepared or ready to say, but to be there, to hear, to be present, to let our legislators know that this is something that's important to us and that we're listening to. We, for the League of Women Voters, we're hosting a day of action on September 18th, Saturday, September 18th, because we know that that's right in the midst of everything that's going on. We'll have a couple locations in Omaha and one at the Capitol. And the purpose of that is to help spread the word, help people kind of identify what's important about their communities and things like that, so that we can share that with senators. We'll actually be handing out postcards that folks can fill out what's important, and we're going to help facilitate getting those to people. So If you join our Twitter or Facebook, we have a sign up link for that. Those are probably the biggest ways I would say. And like Senator Blood said, I think social media is another great way to stay up to date because this is moving so quickly. That's probably the best. Following folks on Twitter is probably the best way to get the most up to date information. And I know Senator Blood has been wonderful about when she has information, she tweets it so that people know, and that's greatly appreciated. So I think that's a great way to go about it. So those are the areas that we're familiar with. But again, I think the biggest thing is contact your senator. They're nice. They want to hear from you.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Rachel. That's really helpful. Good. So with that, well, is there any other, Sam, was there anything you wanted to share? And if not, that's okay. I just want to give you the opportunity.
Yeah, only parting thought is just to the idea of unity and trying to get it right is that's absolutely where Nebraska voters are at. In January, we polled on this and it is consensus. Like it's the same firm we always use, and it was consensus like I've never seen on an issue. So whether it was 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 voters consistently saying, follow the data, don't make this about personal or partisan interests, and make it fair and transparent. So that's where Nebraskans' values are at. That's what they want to see out of this process. I'm encouraged by hearing that that's the feeling that these state senators that you all have going into it, because that's where the voters are. In fact, they said they would be more likely to vote against someone who pushed for unfair maps, even if it benefited their own political party. So we really asked that gut check question. And Nebraskans, it's that proud nonpartisan tradition. They said, just do it fairly, just follow the numbers, do it right, preserve those communities of interest. So that's where they are, and hopefully that's where we'll see this process go.
And I would say to Sam on that, the easiest way for the committee to do that is through transparency, because we're hearing from you all that this is the focus of the program, but that's not what necessarily gets translated because we do only hear the snippets. So the way to combat that, I would say, would be that transparency. So sorry to add a last word onto your last word, but that's such an important point that was made earlier.
No, definitely agree. Yes. Thank you, Sam and Rachel, and to our senators on the panel. This was a really great discussion. It's quelled my fears a little bit, but I'm still gonna advocate and be involved and talk to my senator as well. Hopefully make it to a hearing or two. So, to everyone that's watching, follow the Legislative Study Group's Facebook page. We'll be adding more information on calls to action and more dates as they get released. So we'll try to keep everyone updated as much as possible.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. Bye, friends.